In web programming, if you learn JavaScript well, then you will easily get acquainted with and learn PHP, Python, and other languages. You only need to be good at one language. The others will become easier. However, this view does not apply to CSS, because CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, not a programming language. But CSS recently introduced the if function. Once this function becomes the baseline, the game will completely change. Long lines of code will become streamlined. All responsive code from before 2020 will become obsolete. We'll start with a basic and most important example in web design: responsiveness. On the screen, I have different content items to display appropriately on different devices. By default, on PCs, I'll divide it into 4 columns. But for screens with a maximum size of 1024 pixels, I'll only divide it into 2 columns. And finally, on mobile screens, each row will only have 1 item. I know you could use min-max in this case, however, we're talking about bigger problems, where implementing the code fully is more optimal and easier. But since CSS introduced the if function, everything has changed. Now I won't need to spend many lines of code declaring each device anymore. Instead, I'll create a conditional statement right here. The grid template columns will have the following values. If the current screen size is less than or equal to 767 pixels, only 1 column will be used. If the current screen size is a maximum of 1024 pixels, then 2 columns will be used. And else, the default will be 4 columns. Very short, but also very clear, right? And more importantly, when applying if-else, the CSS code will no longer be rigid in terms of programming logic. Backend developers will also find it much easier to work with CSS. Now let's look at a more complex example to show the real difference. If we apply this if-else method, we can easily change the interface color based on whether the theme is light or dark, right? But in reality, every website has 3 types of themes. These are light, dark, and auto. In this case, the website's theme will depend on the device's theme. So we have else. Because in reality, the system theme can be light or dark. Therefore, we are forced to create another if-else statement here to check the system theme value, and then select the appropriate color. So at this stage, I have nested 2 if-else statements together, just like the logic in other programming languages. Currently, browsers like Chrome and Edge support this feature. However, more demanding browsers like Firefox and Safari don't yet. If this if function ever becomes the baseline in CSS, backend developers will learn CSS much faster. So, if you're a front-end developer or a programmer already familiar with CSS, would you like